So a part of this topic is self-understanding. And how does self-understanding fall into place here? Well, it leads to freedom from the three poisons. Okay, now the three poisons, from the perspective of the Vajrayana, is, one is acceptance, not what we might typically think. The second is, of course, rejection. And the third is indifference. So acceptance of atrocious behavior, whether it is in the psychic realms or whether it is in the physical world, acceptance of atrocious behavior is an error. Why? Because it leads to this happening, whatever that action is, happening again and again and again. Acceptance is, it's not a real interaction with that. There's no alchemy occurring whatsoever. It is merely, it's like, okay, this person, back to martial arts, is going to punch me in the face. So you just stand there and watch the fist hit you in the face. That's much different than harmonizing that action with your highest refinement. So acceptance is, in a sense, doing nothing, but it's not doing nothing because it's not alchemizing anything. We could look at alchemy as the living alchemy as the live doing of nothing, which means there's always alchemy at play. So acceptance leads to the perpetuation of those atrocities again and again and again. You can apply this to really anything, from, political to personal to, cosmic. Acceptance is one of those errors. It's a poison. Now, acceptance would be the one where all of these sick people that Gabor Mate mentioned in his book, that they were engaging in, is accepting your lot in life. Now, the next poison after acceptance was rejection. And this is also error. Rejection reinforces the ego that engaged in the atrocious behavior through direct attack. So rejection, you can think of it like if somebody, and another martial metaphor, if you push into somebody and they brace against it, right? They're rejecting what you're offering. And so they're getting more entrenched and more dug into the foundation of their position. This is the same with any influence. When you reject something, you're seeing something there and you are rejecting it. You're saying nope. And depending on what your habits have been, rejection can be a very useful tool to build up a type of resilience. But we want to remember it is still one of the poisons. And acceptance and rejection both come from a place of separativeness or separateness. The third poison that we discussed was indifference. And indifference is also an error and leads to a callousness and apathy and very often no ethics. It's sort of it's a very modern, nothing has meaning type of philosophy. So this, of course, comes with the illusion of like big view attainment. And this is part of why when you're progressing on the path and going through your meditations and looking at the philosophies and views that might be part of them, we want to have come to realization of that view organically so that we don't end up making these mistakes that can cause a lot of harm and do a lot of damage. Okay, so once again, the three poisons: acceptance, rejection, and indifference. These all come back to judgment, which is a pillar of the separative dual identification. That is this, this judgment thing. It's looking at something and going, I'm not that, right? I'm different, I'm this. And so that creates the either or, which is very far from the neti-neti, or the not this, not that. Finding that middle plane that is not imprisoned by rationalistic dichotomy, or rationalistic opposites, right? So the understanding, just by understanding ourselves, this allows us to understand what the other person is doing, or how they are engaging. Because we understand, we can not levy judgment upon the other person, in the case of a psychic influence or anything else. We can avoid the levying of judgment. We can also avoid what comes out of that, which is acceptance, rejection, or indifference. This means that understanding, it opens a door to a natural transmutation of the energy that's coming through in those attacks, in those infringements. Understanding helps us to keep that heart center open and alive and flowing and fluctuating, and not lock it down. And this, of course, aids in the elevation of the vibrational response when it comes to the psychic influence, and also helps when we are encountering our own cohesion against that infringement. So it all rolls back on itself, right? Understanding is absolutely imperative for easing the transformation that is occurring. This understanding of ourselves, of course, leads us to understanding others. We start to recognize that, oh, you know, same, all same, I'm this is this, that's this, we're all, you start to really connect. And this connection is both a doorway and a byproduct of recognition of unity and oneness, right? So you can go from both ends. You can use understanding to help realize connection and oneness and unity, or you can have realized to some degree oneness and unity, and from that will blossom the understanding. So we want to keep both of those in mind. Now, as we evolve, we no longer engage in the petty dramas, the gossip, very often these are control fantasies of our own superiority, right? So if how you connect with people is through gossiping about the dumb stuff other people are doing, and we're so much better because we don't do this, this is part of that hierarchical, very dualistic stuff. And so as that vibration keeps rising, as your baseline frequency keeps evolving, you'll find that you're no longer in resonance with habits like this. You're no longer in resonance with the low vibrational habits of distraction like we've discussed in previous videos. And this means that you will no longer be in resonance with the people who engage in those activities. So I remember I went through a phase where I was going through this, and there were habits like gossip, for example, that were simply not a part of this particular being anymore. There was no resonance there to do that. So I was like, okay, I'm just not going to talk about anyone who isn't present. And some people, some of my friends, that was a platform for them to evolve along with me. And for others, I can count on one finger, 2 fingers, the amount of communications that we've had since then. So simply by no longer being in resonance with connecting with other people in that format, the people who need that format to connect, there's not really much of a bridge there. So we need to be very aware that as we are growing through all of this, as our frequency is rising, as the energy is building, as the soul is lightening, right, becoming lighter and lighter, and going through its own growth, that the people we spend time with will very often change. And there's also very often a period of time where you're no longer of resonance with your old group of friends and people you may have been close to for years and years. And you also haven't found a new group. And this can be a period of loneliness for a lot of people. However, when we are afflicted by our own company, we can learn a lot about ourselves and become a good companion to ourselves. So there's a lot of growth in there, for sure. And also we just want to be aware that if we're in that space where we've no longer in resonance with this, we haven't quite found the people who are in resonance with this, with where we're going, give it some time and just have an open mind and hang out with people. Be honest, be sincere, be yourself. And through that, you will start to more easily and more easily find more like resonance folks. Now, we might ask, practically, how do we move forward from here? And there's 2 layers to this. The first layer comes from the perspective of our lower identity. And so this is, again, not trying to hit harder than we can hit, not trying to pretend to be more evolved than we actually are. From this perspective, we can, of course, cut ties with people that are of, damaging mindset and vibration and are constantly trying to diminish us. So you can cut ties, cut cords, you can be very clear about erecting boundaries. You alter the environment, of course, because you're working from the standpoint of me and that. So that's where you alter the environment. And you alter the environment for your emotional, your mental, and your physical health so that you can essentially recover the health of the vital, astral, and mental fields and the resting frequency of those fields. You can elevate that vibration without the weights that we're being constantly dragging on it all the time, right? So as we raise our vibration, we end up raising our circles as well, or elevating the vibration of the circles we spend time in, as we just mentioned. Okay, so from the perspective of the lower identity, you engage with the manipulation of the environment. And this has a lot of value because it allows us to make a transition that's very hard to make otherwise, right? When it comes to like health, it's very hard to get healthy in the environment that made you sick. And this applies to the mind, the emotions, and the body. And when it comes to the health and the spiritual vibration of our field, times of retreat from the world can be very, very valuable. Okay, now everyone likes to stipulate how when you bring it into the world, that's where it's real. But in order to find that higher refinement, there's very often times of retreat that need to be had so that everything can quiet down enough that you can actually perceive that new level of attainment. Once you can perceive that, then you can start to orient yourself towards it. You can start to build resonance with it, and you can equalize with it. And once you've found some equalization with it, and through that equalization, you've found the akasha and the equanimity that is kind of like a bubble surrounding it, then you can bring that back into lower densities, back into the world, and test it that way. But we want to be capable of offering ourselves the environment that allows us to grow, that allows us to shed the old baggage. Once we've done that, then we can test it, right? And so from that higher standpoint, as you evolve, then you can explore going back into those environments, back into those circles if it's something that you even still have any desire to do. And how do you deal with it? You know, how real is that evolution that you've gone through, right? How, to borrow from what the limbo, right? How low can you go? So keep all this in mind, because you'll find it pops up along your path as you're practicing, right? Also, from the standpoint of like your highest, you know, that refinement, separation really truly starts to dissolve. Not as an idea, not as something that sounds fancy, but you really truly feel the environment, people, animals, nature, whatever, as you. And that is a huge part of the path, is you're learning how to recognize that what is within is of what is without. And that keeps going. That keeps going and going and going. So as you reach that point, the psychic influence, say from the perspective of the psychic attacks we were talking about, you not only recognize the pain that that individual is in that would cause them the need to contract like that. Maybe it's just their baseline personality. It's more of an accidental besiegement, and it's just their personality. It's where they're at. You can not only recognize the pain they're in, understand it, but you feel it as if you are them. Their contraction is yours. And here's the thing, is as you start to go through this, anything of density that enters the field, just like you're alchemizing yourself, you're alchemizing that field all the time. So whether it's your own stimulus that is dense, an old aspect of yourself that's being alchemized and released, or something from someone else that's coming in, it's still happening. And you are that person, they are you. This really starts to become a deep connection. It can actually be very, very enriching, because you are able to experience the world, experience life from the perspective of infinite central nodes, which is, like I said, very, very enriching. It's really hard to put into words, very difficult to put into words. But ultimately, there is no identity left to receive the attack or receive the abuse. There's no identity there. There is only that highest refinement, devoid of identity compartments, right? Now, if we try to take on that view before we have achieved that view, then we end up becoming a doormat that takes on all kinds of damage and ends up being just a quagmire of resentment and tension that's hidden beneath a facade of compassion and goodwill. Okay, so this martyrdom syndrome, this is really, it can set us back in a lot of ways. So we always, always, always need to be looking at our motivations. We need to be looking at who and what we are. And from here, we can hopefully identify the truth of what's going on and allow our orientation to remain true to what is true. For training, please check out the website. If you enjoyed this, there's also retreats that I host as well. So that information is on the website, along with the courses in Tai Chi, Qigong, Hermetic Alchemy, and Meditation. There's a Zenden there, which is a Q&A video reference library. All the questions you might have, I get back to you via video there. And hopefully I will see you there. All right, thanks a lot. Have fun, practice. Bye.